Welcome to the third long story long. Thank you all for being here on this rainy day. I know it's a big deal in California to leave your house in the cold and the rain, so I appreciate you all for being here. Today's a very special episode because we're doing it in collaboration with Jikoni Archives and Studio, and we will be with Kiano Moju, who is an American food writer, recipe developer, culinary producer, and video host as well, and director.
I'm not used to hearing myself identified as American. I was like, okay, yep, that's
Listen, I asked you, well, yes, well, that was your,
my mom
that was your own bio.
Is quick to remind me every time I'm like, oui. She's like, you were born here. You are not one of us. I get corrected a lot.
Okay, well, you get to define your own identity as far as I'm concerned. So African, by way of America.
Yeah,
yes.
I'll take that one.
Let's do that one.
Yeah.
Okay, great. But she also founded Jikoni Archives, Recipe Archives, which is a nonprofit which treasures and documents the legacy of traditional African foods across the diaspora. Yeah. So it's going to be a very interesting episode. I'm excited to dive into that. So, I have so many juicy questions for you, but let's start at the beginning. I know you kind of started, in your biography, you started cooking at quite a young age, like from the age of 7.
7 is when my mom put me in cooking class. My mom's here. So the story she tells me, because how do I know what I was doing at age 2, 3, 4, 5? So this is, according to her, when she would cook, I would want to be right there with her. Okay. So my mom's from Kenya, and we have these flatbreads called chapatis. It's like a beautiful, flaky, layered flatbread. And it's very much something you do on the weekend. So she'd be in the kitchen, rolling out the dough, shaping all the balls. And I wanted to be right there too. So she put me on the counter, gave me a little piece of Play-Doh. Not that type of Play-Doh, but dough to play with. Yeah. And instead of getting bored, I'd be like, I'd want my dough to do everything hers did. So if hers got rolled, mine got rolled. If hers got cooked, mine got cooked. If hers was on the table, mine was on the table. Mm-hmm. And my mom is very much, cooking is a necessity. I need to do it, not like as an activity. Mm-hmm. And so when I treated cooking like an activity, she was like, somebody else gonna teach you, because I don't have time
to teach you.
So for summer camps, I don't know how she found it, but in Berkeley, California, so Northern California Bay Area, there's a cooking camp for kids that she put me in. I think I was 7, and they taught us how to make different dishes from around the world. And at the end of camp, we invited like our families to have like a little luncheon. So you have like all these like tiny humans cooking with step stools, preparing lunch for everyone. Oh. And I loved it. And she just kept, anytime there's an opportunity of like a kids cooking class or a camp or lessons, I was doing it. So I started really young, but just kept learning through those classes.
That's amazing. And do you have like any recollection around like did you have a desire to eat the food? Like what was the spark?
Yeah.
Was it just because you saw your mom do it, or did it come from a,
I think I've always been drawn to what happens around food. Okay. So when I was young, I would remember word art. Did you use word art in South Africa? It's like really crazy letters that you can make on your computer. It's like free software that came on your computer, and I would create menus. Oh. Print them off, put them on the dining table. I would take people's orders. I'm like, what do you want to drink? And all that. I was that kind of kid. I just liked all the things that came around like cooking and feeding people. Mm-hmm. And so I would do that as a kid. And in the mornings, I have a family that loves to sleep in. And I think I can't wake up a different time Monday through Friday than the weekend. If I'm waking up 6, 7, that's when I'm waking up. And so I'd wake up, go sit like inches away from the TV on like volume 2, and just like watch PBS, like public television cooking shows in the morning. Okay. And then I would go cook and then talk to myself like, now you're gonna put in sugar and put in flour.
Okay, so that's just kind of how you learned how to cook growing up. And you stayed in cooking classes the whole way
all throughout until through high school. I was taking cooking classes.
Wow. And then I know you it was mentioned that, when you'd go back to Kenya, your grandmother on your mom's side, so you would learn, did you learn a lot of the African context, like food context through mom? Was that what was getting cooked at home?
So my grandma cooks incredibly. There was a moment in my youth I thought I was there. And then I get humbled every time I go cook with her. I'm like, okay, we're not there yet.
Right.
But my mom's family from Kenya, from a mountainous region 2 hours south of Nairobi, very traditional Maasai family. They're cattle ranchers, they have goats, they have sheep, they have chicken. And so spending summers there, it's middle of nowhere, there was like no power, especially when I was young. Everything you did throughout the day was farm work. You're letting the animals out, you're like sifting maize, you're cooking every single meal because there's nowhere to go buy food. Like you had to have your groceries. Town at the time took like an hour to drive down the hill off these like what is the word? But yeah, there's not like unpaved roads.
Yeah.
And so food was done sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun.
So from like source to completion.
Yeah. Everything. Every Sunday slaughter a goat or a sheep.
Yeah.
I helped.
Yeah. I know how that goes.
Yeah. For folks, a lot of folks here have a big disconnection of like where their food comes from or whichever, where my grandma's like, which one? I'm like, that one.
And did you ever find it traumatizing as a child? Because if I think about my nephew now, who's like 7, who loves animals. I mean, again, different generation. But yeah, we always have to hide. Like if we ever have to like chicken, like we have to hide it.
Yeah, nothing hidden. If anything, I needed to be hidden away because I was a busybody. I wanted to do everything, be everywhere, even in spaces, because like culturally there's places for men to be and places for women to be.
Right.
And where the animals are slaughtered and all that, that's a male space. But I think because being American, not growing up, I was kind of allowed, like no one bothered me to not be there.
Yeah.
So I was where I wasn't supposed to be, and I loved it. I had a great time in the slaughter pit.
The slaughter pit. So, I mean, you were born and raised here, but you're going back. So, how was it navigating the cultural differences and nuances for you? How often were you going back to Kenya? And was it any adjustment, or having a mother at home or parents? Is your father also Kenyan? Or?
No, my dad's Nigerian.
Okay.
So a whole different culture.
Yeah.
Like from a river area. So going to my mom's family's home was so much fun. Because like you're in California, if you live in a city, any kind of city kid, there's a lot of rules. You can't go here, tell people where you're going. On a ranch, it's like no one's bothering you. You like run around, do what you want. And like it's just complete freedom because you're in the middle of nowhere. So I thought it was a great time. The only adjustment I had was my stomach for the first week of being there. Okay. My mom would pack me like a cup of noodles for week 1, and then after that, I was having a good time.
How often would you go back?
I think is probably every other summer since I was 6. Okay. Like whenever. Sometimes we skipped one, but as often. I mean, flights, they're still expensive, but they were very expensive back then. Yeah. But it would be for like summer vacation.
Yeah. That was like me, honestly, coming to the U.S. It was in reverse because my dad's American.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, my dad's American, my mom's South African, so we would come every other year and spend the summers here. So it was similar, but just
other way around.
Other way around, yeah. And then would you go back to your dad's side ever?
No, I've never been to Nigeria.
Okay.
If anything, I probably missed the window. To go, but I've spent a lot of time in Kenya where more than like other places I feel like is a nice second home, but very much in the countryside. So now as an adult, I'm trying to go back more and learn the rest of the country because the ranch is a ranch and you can only stare at hills and dirt for so long. And it's a cool country. There's so much to do. So I'm trying to see more.
Okay. So then you segued, we segue out of childhood, and then you went to university in Syracuse?
Yeah.
Okay. So you went to University of Syracuse and then you transitioned to London.
So Syracuse is upstate New York, nowhere near New York City, just hills and a lot of snow. And Syracuse has a campus in London.
Okay.
So I did a semester abroad in London when I was undergrad. Loved it. So then when it came time to look for grad school, I exclusively looked at London. I literally typed in Masters Publishing London. And that's how I found my college. Very
Okay. So wait,
high
let's
strategy.
get into that a little bit. What did you, remind us what you studied in
Undergrad?
New York? Yeah.
Undergrad was pre-law.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you did pre-law. What incentivized that decision?
Debate team in high school.
Okay.
Just good arguer. And everyone's like, you know, when you're a kid, you're around like your family friends, like, oh my God, you should be a lawyer. I'm like, okay. Lawyers make good money. Because like food for me was like my child dream. And then once I got older and thinking of like practical careers, how do you get a career in like food video? Like how do you become, you know, Emeril Lagasse at the time? There's no path to that. So the older I got, the more practical I started thinking. And law made sense. I felt like my personality fit it. It was safe. And then once I had a lot of my lawyer money, in my 40s, I would open a restaurant was the strategy.
Okay.
Yeah. The lawyer money. Lawyer money is good money.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Exactly.
I was wondering why, why you didn't go to culinary school.
I'm not built for that. Culinary school, I think there's two parts when it comes to food. There's you're feeding people, you're cooking, you're in a restaurant, you're catering, and then there's the educational part. You're teaching, whether it's in a cooking school, classes, or you're an editor for a food magazine, or you're someone on TV. And personally, I was most excited about the educational part more than the restaurant part. The restaurant part still felt more practical. You get money, you find a space, you open a restaurant, where the educational part was like this weird, ominous, way cooler space, but how do you get in? So knowing that my aspirations weren't necessarily, I want to cook and like work my way in like a kitchen to restaurant, culinary school doesn't make sense because that's what it's really for. It teaches you how to work in a professional kitchen. Where my aspirations were like, I want to like make videos and teach home cooks how to cook for themselves.
Okay.
So it didn't seem to make sense. And also, it's a very harsh environment. Like, I don't like being shouted at. I would have been in trouble. I maybe possibly could have been kicked out of culinary school.
Right.
Just based on like the personality of the culture.
Right.
Not too negative.
Okay. So you decided you opted out of that path and then,
I never even considered
kind
it.
of with like a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
I was
okay.
just like, no.
You're just like, no.
Absolutely
But you
not.
still had like food dreams
Yeah,
in your
food
back
dreams.
pocket.
Retirement food dreams. Yeah.
Retirement food dreams in your back pocket. So you went into law and then you segued from law.
So the way law degrees work here is that there's a bunch of different majors that qualify you to then apply for law school. So mine was communications and rhetorical studies. It's like a Bachelor of Science of Communication. My friends and I joke, it's a major to learn how to be a con artist. Because all it does is teach you how to like, if you want this, do that. If you want this, do that. And teach you how to like manipulate situations for effective results, which was a pre-law program. So that's what I did
Okay.
undergrad.
For undergrad. And then for your master's, you decided to study.
Publishing. So there's an exam you have to take LSAT after you finish your undergrad, so an entry exam for law school.
Yeah.
So I was living in LA. I was going to these classes at UCLA campus studying for my law exam, but in my notebook, I'm like writing content ideas and like series ideas and formats. And it was completely checked out of whatever was happening in there. And so I called my mom with negotiation night before my exam. I was like, listen, give me like a year to figure out if I can find a way to make a career in food work. And if I don't, it's better to be older as a lawyer. I'm babyface. Like, no one's going to take me seriously if I go to law school now. So that can happen later. Let me see if I can find a career path in this. And if it fails, law school's always there. And so I went and looking for a master's program within that industry to make it feel closer. Because it's still like a big question mark, like who the hell works in publishing? Who works at magazines or these TV networks? I had no idea.
Right. And so you decided to go get your master's in publishing with the hopes of being able to segue into food and content creation kind of space.
Yeah. I wanted to study it. I was interning at Food Magazine. So the idea was I want to get closer to the industry, and the master's did exactly that.
Okay. So you talked about interning. Let's do that. So you graduated, and then how did you were studying at the same time while doing your internships?
Yeah. The master's programs in Europe almost feels a bit part-time. Like we had lecture 2 days a week. There were 6 of us. I was like, oh, damn, what did I sign up for?
Okay.
And so you have a lot of time because the idea is, learn by doing. So you're encouraged to apply to intern for different companies while you're doing your master's, so then you can loop it into your projects and studying. So I did 2 internships while I was there. One at a family-run cooking school, which was very fun, and one at a food magazine.
And what was you in? Did you just apply, like, out of the orange, or?
Yeah, I think it was some cold emailing.
Okay. And what did that look like?
Honestly, easier than when I did in America, because I applied to internships like at every food magazine in this country and never got an interview.
Yeah.
But something about in London, maybe, I don't know, culturally, I think America is like just hyper competitive and there's just literally more people here. People responded back. Okay. And I was able to like go into interviews and
what was do you remember what your, in terms of cold emailing, I mean, I know as an actor, when I got signed, that's what I did, right? And a lot of people ask me like what I put as my selling
What you put in there?
As my selling point to get me in the door. And I think it's a useful piece of information for people to have. It doesn't work for everyone, but it's a useful thing. So for a young person who was doing your master's and trying to get in a foreign space, like what was your selling point? Or like what did that email?
Yeah, it had work samples. I was staying in like it wasn't a dorm, but it was like students only housing. There's like a lot of these buildings in London, and it's a studio apartment, and I had a 2-burner induction stove and a counter space about that big. And I would shoot recipe videos from that kitchen against my window and like created samples. And that's what I included. Okay. And so I wasn't just like, I would like to. I made a portfolio just on my own, just like test shoots, internal, my own stuff.
And like attach that to your email. Like
I never sent just words. No, everything. I mean, it's food. How much can I really tell you? I think with food you have to show, especially when it's like content making. Yeah. And because when I did the undergrad program is when I first studied photography. Okay. And we had a professor who gave us different assignments, and he's like, go up to people and take their portraits.
When you did the undergrad?
In London, I studied abroad in London. Okay. So he was like, go take portraits of people. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm going to walk up to a stranger and be like, can I take your picture? People said yes, which I was very shocked at, but I hated the entire process. I liked working with still objects so much more. And so once we had the projects where we could do still objects, I would cook and I would shoot the food, and then shooting food became my comfort. So by the time it came to applying for internships, I had built up this nice little portfolio of food photography that I just done literally in my dorms.
So wait, where did the photography come in?
When I was doing my undergrad abroad in London. So it was one of the courses I took. American schools are weird. Like, if I know there's a lot of like foreign folks. You take your major, but then you're a full-time student, so you have all these additional things you can take like if you want to. Yeah. Yeah, and photography
was just one of them.
Yeah, it sounded like fun. It was fun, and I took it.
Okay. And so, once you completed your internships and your masters, what would you say what were your key takeaways from that? Like, how do you think you value, like, what was the most value you gained?
I think the biggest value honestly, everything just felt a lot closer and less intimidating. Because from an outsider looking into any industry, it's very easy to perceive that these people have some magic and that they like are this much more experted and have all these like mysteries. And then you get there and like very few people know fully what they're doing. A lot of people are learning on the job and things are constantly changing. And so everything felt less impossible. Everything felt a lot closer. I realized that the skills I had built doing my own little projects in my blog were transferable. I didn't need necessarily to have, 5 years experience in XX magazine in order to compete for some of these roles. Like I've done it, which was nice because everything just felt so much bigger than it was before I did that program.
Right. So it kind of just gave you the confidence you needed to be like, I got this.
It made it less scary.
Yeah.
To be honest, yeah.
But what was scary during that time? Like, what were the things you were challenged with in that chapter for you?
I still think finding a full-time role then and now in such a niche industry is competitive. I ended up finding and applying to a job that I moved to LA for while still in London.
Okay.
And when I looked at the job application, even though I was like, oh, I know this, the role I applied to, I hadn't done half of that stuff.
Okay.
Like 50% of things I had never done before.
Okay.
But I applied anyways because they had nothing else to apply to. And I was like, oh, worst case scenario, they'll know who I am. And then when something more appropriate comes along, maybe.
Okay. And then what happened?
I got the job.
You got the job.
I got it. Like having never seen them, having a lamp dimmer than that, like next to my face, 8 p.m. in London, because the job was in LA, and like doing Zoom interviews or whatever we're using.
So, okay, so you were studying, or you'd finished studying at this point?
I was
or you were about
writing
to
my
graduate?
thesis.
Okay. Okay. I'm like, I want to go into the job thing, but I want to go into the thesis because I know, so I'm going to put that on ice for a second and we're going to circle back into that. But I know your thesis was kind of around culinary representation.
The thesis was more like this is a time, if you guys remember this, when you'd open Facebook and it'd just be a bunch of like cooking videos and like hands and like really, really fast, like 30 seconds. This was that time, is when I was writing my thesis. And so I wrote about that, the rise of like all these food videos and like where it came from. Why is Facebook the biggest publisher of recipes? Like up until then, Facebook was just like, here are my kids, like here's like I'm engaged. It was incredibly, there's no content. And so I wrote my thesis on that rise and just like studied it.
Okay. And what about the emergence, what about the representation of African foods in that time? Did your thesis encompass any of that? And
the thing that I found once I studied the industry was once you put everything on paper, it's very quick to see who's not present, who's not there. When I say who, I mean what types of foods are missing. Literally from countries in which like voices were omitted. Okay. Everything was burgers, broccoli cheddar casseroles. It was just so American, so junk food. It was, very Midwest. Even though I'm like, mind you, I'm in England, and this is still what is like dominating the space. So I was like, oh, there's a lot of things that are in the food world that are not present and have no space here on the internet.
Right. And that informed a lot of what you created.
So my conclusion of the thesis is that there needs to be spaces, like even though we think social media is amazing, we can't just rely on spaces created by tech companies to put out what is necessary. Because recipes, as much as they're fun and they're cool, they're very much a necessity to how we live and survive as people. Before 2 generations ago, we all got recipes from our mom or from someone in our family or from the grandma, and it was passed down. And there's data showing that we now go to the internet before we go to people.
Yeah.
And so there's a danger in that where
There's a
If
lot.
everything is like missing and then everyone's going to this one resource, what is being published on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube will become our diets.
Right.
Period. And like it's a very concerning thing to think of, why is a tech company making the choices of how we eat? And so my conclusion was that people who are advocates of culinary education, who actually value that recipes and cooking and teaching people are important roles in our life, we need to create our own spaces and not just rely on these tech spaces in order to push these things and keep them alive and keep teaching them.
I'm going to circle back to this because it's going to come back in the journey. But so while you were, as you were concluding your thesis, you applied for this job. What was the job?
It was at BuzzFeed for their food channel Tasty as a video producer.
So you applied to BuzzFeed,
Yeah.
not having half of the qualifications.
As the role was a video producer role, and I had taken 2 video classes in high school.
Okay.
You know, one was like on our school news channel where I was a floor director, meaning when it's the news anchors, I did that. And that was my job. That's just that, like a chair cue.
And cue. Right.
That, yeah, very extensive experience for that job.
Okay.
Overqualified.
So what was your selling point for the job? Like you looked at it and you said, okay, I don't have many other options.
Yeah.
So that was part of your incentive for applying, and you obviously wanted the job.
I didn't want to apply.
You didn't?
No, because
So-
I wrote many critical things about them in my thesis, because they were the leader of, you know, they were, and I think we all have an institution where like, that's evil. Like at the time, all these digital media brands were the ones putting out the content that I was being so critical of.
Yeah, right.
And so my instinct is like, I don't want to contribute to what I think is flawed. But my professor, Desmond Overwork, advised me. He's like, Kiano, you should work for one of these companies you wrote about, because you're a student, you're looking at everything from the outside, and you should learn how this machine works from the inside. See if is there any space for change, because if they have the most influence and impact, surely that's where you should be. And so that's where I applied.
Okay, and given you felt underqualified, again, I ask you, one, what gave you the gumption to apply anyway?
To do it?
Yeah, to do it. And then also, what was your selling point, and what was that interview process like, you know? Like what did you put in your application? What was your pitch? Because you're like, half of these things I haven't done.
I hadn't
done.
done.
So how did you sell yourself?
I stopped interning and I was working part-time admin at Robert Half, which is like a recruitment company.
Okay.
And if anyone's ever looking for a job, work for a recruitment company, like temp, just like, because I was there for 3 more months. So I took a temp job at a recruitment company, and the recruiters helped me jazz up my resume, because that's what they do. They really helped me and encouraged to even further visualize. So my entire resume was like a photo PDF of like, it felt unconventional. It was like a PDF, just like images with like a little bit of text on it. It was a full-on visual resume.
That's interesting.
It was interesting. I thought it was crazy, but I'm like, these people get people creative jobs, or the creative team, they get people jobs every day, so they must know what they're talking about. So I had a visual resume. I didn't do text. I listened to my advisor and applied to the job. I got the interview and went through, I think, 3 or 4 rounds of interviews and got offered the role, but I didn't know exactly why until I started working there. And they told me it's because I wrote my thesis on the industry. They're like, we've never had anyone on the team that has that much analysis. And they're like, that was unique, and that's why we brought you on.
Oh, okay.
They didn't care that I didn't know diddly squat about the camera. They're like, we can teach you that. But the thing that you're studying, no one on our team has that insight. Everyone on our team knows how to press record and do all the stuff.
Right.
And so I had, through the master's degree, brought a lens that
They needed.
was, it was new.
Yeah. So that was your selling point.
It was.
Okay.
I didn't know it was.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Because that's why I was actively writing it when I was interviewing.
Okay.
And that's what got me the role.
Wow. Very cool. So how was your time there? How long were you there and how was your time?
I was there for just shy of 2 years. It was interesting. My time there had many seasons. The first season's like new job jitters, coming in, I don't know how to do half of what they want. And the brand was big. I went from being a student, interning at like a very small food magazine with like very polite English people who were trying cakes. That was a highlight of our day. We're doing cake samples today. Everyone rate them 1 through 10. I'm like, this is great. And then now I'm working for this brand with an audience of 7 million people, producing these videos that I had to come up with the idea myself. I had to develop that recipe. I had to shoot that video, and I had to edit that video and do the photography. It was a very unique producer role. They call it full stack. And so it was nerve-wracking to learn and crunch in all those skills, but also hope that content performed. Because if our videos were hitting under 1 million views, it was seen as a failure.
As a failure.
So yeah, it was high pressure, but I learned really fast because my teammates were awesome.
Yeah.
Everyone will come in, like, let me show you this, and I learned quick, like 1 month, learned how to do my job.
Yeah. And did you struggle with any imposter syndrome? And also, how was representation in your organization?
Yeah, I'm not going to call it imposter syndrome because having done my interviews from London, I didn't see anybody on the team besides the hiring managers. And I later found out when I started the role that I was the brand's first and only black. Deeply melanated human, period.
Right.
And so it wasn't imposter syndrome. It literally, the audience, once my work published, because these hands were in every video, and people felt a type of way about these hands. They literally were like, Tasty, can you go back to using white hands only?
Really?
Or is it just me, or is this person wearing too much self-tanner? So I'm like, oh, that's a thought.
Wow.
So it's not, so yeah, I think I had like not imposter syndrome, but I had the new job jitters. And then once my work published, I was like, oh, I did not factor this in. I did not expect it.
Right.
But the audience is very vocal. We all see social media comments. So I don't know how to define it, but it wasn't that. It was just, it was an audience that grew without any type of diversity shown to them. Because even my team members who were maybe like East Asian were very fair-skinned, and the food they were making was American food, and it was faceless at the time when we started.
Yeah.
And so it was hard finding the rhythm there because, it's such high metrics of performance.
Right.
So it's like, how are you expected to like do really well, but then you have this audience that's like resisting your presence.
Your presence.
Yeah.
Your actual skin tone.
So yeah, it was very mixed experiences because when it comes to like my team members and like my peers, it was amazing. But like dealing with the audience is very dependent on the videos, dependent on the day.
But your videos were still high performing.
It took time, and I think maybe it was after my first 6 months, it's like anywhere, like you're in this bubble, you're in this world, and you go home for the holidays. And I was like, how are things? You tell them, and you get like that reality check of like, oh, this is crazy. Because no one ever talked about it in my team, about our like racist audience or anything. So I just kind of took it on the chin. And when I went home and talked to friends and family, they're like, this doesn't sound like a great work environment. I'm like, I guess it's not. How do I change this? How do I make this more comfortable? And so I went back to work after the holidays trying to find solutions.
Okay. And what did that look like?
It was me saying, hey, right now, all the voices in our brand are from these 7 people in this office. Why don't we bring other people in? We live in LA. There's a lot of people here. Why can't we bring in a chef and bring in other folks and tell their food stories and show their food? So it's not just the 7 of us, because I can't be like hire more people, because that's like a whole different issue. But I was told that that wasn't a priority, so we couldn't go for that. So then I just stopped asking and just started doing what I wanted.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what do you mean by that? What do you mean you started doing what you
It
wanted?
means instead of asking, hey, can we work with XX person,
You would just,
we would just do
would
it.
just do
Or if I found a really great chef, I would introduce them to one of my team members. Because we had editorial autonomy, which is very rare in any kind of media. We shot what we wanted. We didn't have to pitch. We didn't have to do anything. So I'm like, why am I asking if that's not our workflow anyways? So I would introduce people, be like, hey, you know, one of my teammates, Matthew, I'm like, do you want to go shoot with this really cool person? He's like, yeah, I'm down. And just started pairing folks. Like for Black History Month, my first year, my goal was to have the entire month, one video a day of representation. I think we ended up getting 20 videos.
okay.
And they all performed better than our normal content
Okay.
because it gave people a chance to see themselves, and they came. So it wasn't to our normal audience, but other people were like, oh my God, am I seeing Haitian
no,
pickles on Tasty? Like, what's going on here? And
Mm-hmm.
people came for that. And it did well.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became a thing where when Hispanic Heritage Month rolled around, we were encouraged to make more videos like we did for Black History Month. And then when, you know, Pride Month came around, and it just carried on into how we worked. But it wasn't something that I pitched to the, you know, team leaders and it was approved. I just did it.
Yeah.
And my team members were down.
Do and say sorry later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And did your organization, was there any pushback
On what?
on that approach? Like once they kind of caught on to being like,
I think because it did well, there was no opportunity.
yeah.
The thing that happened though is that our Black History Month content was celebrated company-wide, like, you know, corporate, all hands, like the entire company globally. It was celebrated worldwide, and then it was made a priority, but one of my team members was tasked with leading it.
What? So then what did you do?
What could I do?
Upsetting to me.
What could I do?
What
I
did
was
you
still on my
do?
first year.
No. After this was your, okay.
Yeah, I just carried on, kept working. I saw the trend of these initiatives, because like, you know, it's not like, oh, we did this, everything's fine. It's always with boundaries. So then it became, if there was an idea, pitch for something, it got put in its box. Oh, we should save that for Hispanic Heritage Month. Oh, we should save that. We should save. And so all the,
It started
anything
to get
cultural got put in its
categorized,
box.
yeah.
And so then I did my second Kiano Rebellion, where in the middle of summer, I was like, I want to do the most African video ever in the middle of summer and prove that we don't need to wait till Black History Month.
Okay.
And I did a video called Party Rice Around Africa. And I think it's still one of like my highest performing videos I did.
Okay, what did that entail? What was it?
It entailed me shooting while on vacation in London, because we had a London office. So I was traveling to London. I shot some videos there because I was like, I'm not taking this PTO. So I shot with four different chefs, 4 different rice dishes. It was like a compilation video, and just put it out in June, I think, June or July. And people loved it. And I think that video still to this day, like,
Keeps climbing.
keeps growing. It hasn't stayed stagnant at all. But the goal was like to show that like we don't need
It doesn't-
cultural heritage months in order to show the real goal was to show that everyone's food is everyday food.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be like, oh, this is not American. Like, we're all here. We're all cooking this food every day in our own homes. It just might not be what, you know, the whole team cooks, but there are people out there that identify with this food. And if you put it out there, you'll have a really nice audience, but also people who are just into cooking could also be excited by it.
I love the through line of like not feeling like you need permission to do what you want to do in your narrative, you know?
I think
like,
it's a 2-step. It's like I'll try it the right way and then see that there's a wall.
And then do
And
it
then I'll be
anyway.
like,
But like even in applying for the job, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of people would look at that JD and be like, I'm underqualified next, right? Just scroll on to the next thing. But like being able to be like, okay, I'm underqualified, you know, F it. I'm gonna submit myself anyway and do the thing, and then being like, okay, I'm gonna take initiative anyway, and then getting, you know, hitting and being like, okay, I'm gonna
I mean,
do
with
this
really, with what
anyway. And
choice?
that's like a really
Yeah.
valuable, I think, lesson and takeaway in our career journeys, right? We often sit and wait for permission. We're waiting for somebody to say, like, you're allowed to do this thing. Like, I give you permission to take up space.
Yeah.
And like not taking a back seat in our lives, really,
Yeah.
because we're waiting for somebody to co-sign
It's
on our
true.
ideas.
I think the
Like-
reason why I'm on a 2-step as well, because some people there are times you get a yes. You don't
Yeah.
have to like
Yeah,
ram your way through every wall because you can knock and someone will open.
sometimes.
But so I'm a knock first
Yeah, yeah,
is my general approach.
yeah.
And then if you don't answer, then we'll find different ways.
Which is, you know, it's. I think both are a great approach, but either way, still having the conviction to be able to find your own lane and make it work, even in a necessarily, also in the context that you're in, right?
Yeah.
You're a token Black female, and
Yeah.
and your
Well,
team.
without knowing, I was blindsided token. 'Cause
Yeah.
I didn't see nobody.
Yeah,
Until
and
I showed up.
That's tricky, right? Not were you? I guess were there other women on your team as well?
No, they're women. There's no shortage of like food media is very female spaced. So yeah, it's really, I think the issues that come within food media are really cultural representation and voices because food belongs to everybody. But in the US, you can even think about like folks, if you don't work in food media, but you're here in LA, what restaurants get talked about the most? It's like a very short list and type of places.
So then, after BuzzFeed, so then what happened towards the end of you being there? Like, what was your incentive to decide to move on?
So there's two parts. So right now we're in my studio. This space that we're in, I first toured after my first year at BuzzFeed.
After your first?
First year. Because I ended up staying
Okay.
for 2, but year 1 is when I found this space.
Okay.
Didn't feel like the right time. I felt like no matter where I went, because the thing I want to be very clear about is BuzzFeed is just a representation of our country. That company, and I can spoken to many people who've worked at every food media brand, our stories are almost like near identical, our experiences, because it's just a reflection of the society and the spaces we built. And so I knew that I couldn't just like bounce and leave and expect much different elsewhere. And realize that I'm at a company right now that has the strongest voice in this industry. And I can use that as a tool to wedge a little bit of a bigger crack before I leave.
Okay.
That way I'm not just like starting cold.
Okay.
And then we had layoffs a year later. So that sorted itself out to leaving. It was chosen for me.
Okay. So you talk about the crack. What did that really look like? Did the crack expand in the next year?
The crack was, I think it was really the content I made my year 2 is more aligned with what I do now. Year 1, it was learning how to shoot videos, figuring out the brand voice and how I can contribute to it. And year 2 was how can my lens and experience in food be shared on this platform and help expand this audience, but also excite the audience we had. And so I was able to do fun projects where Black Panther came out. Nydia Okorafor is a writer of the Black Panther comics. She came in and we imagined if Wakanda was a country, what would the food look like? And I was able to develop a recipe and produce a video around that. And that's something that was not an option to do year 1, but year 2, that's when like we're going to take advantage of these pop culture moments and like any excuse I have to like sprinkle a little bit of something in there. I had a family wedding in Kenya. I invited a teammate to come out with me. We checked out some cameras and we filmed our traditional Maasai wedding, the barbecue portion, and showed what Kenyan style barbecue looks like. And so really just thinking about, you know, what are the overall things that people are interested in food, no matter where you are, where you're from, and how can I, you know, take advantage of being at this like really big platform with a really big audience to shed light on foods that hadn't been seen before.
Amazing. So then layoffs happen.
Yep.
And then what? It's one of my favorite things to say.
And then what?
And then what?
And then I was like, first shock.
Yeah.
In fact, because it was January and I didn't open Jikoni until, I didn't get this space until September. And so I freelanced, because I'd never worked with anyone else professionally in the space.
Right.
It was just this one company. So I freelanced because Tasty was so big. People were always in our LinkedIn DMs trying to hire us when we couldn't. I was like, great, and I can work with all these people who are trying to work with me.
Okay.
And so I did freelancing, and then I decided that I wanted to create my own workspace. And so before I did that, because I knew very little about running a business, but I knew that I would have no life once I did.
Yeah.
So I did a 3-month Euro vacation, just like big summer trip, visited all my friends, and then I came and started building out the studio.
So let's just quickly go back to the freelance space. So you just kind of circle back to all these people that had reached out to you and were like,
I think
hey,
I'm actually, I don't even think I had to reach out to anyone. I think it was still coming.
coming in. So you just were able to
Actually say yes.
actually say yes. So you were doing that. What type of people did you work with during that time?
Other digital media brands, people, it would be a mix of like culinary producing, food styling. So it's like different digital food content. It was always social food content and helping make that. But everyone had their own workflow. Sometimes we're at restaurants, sometimes we're in studio. And so it was nice to like be outside of a tiny little workspace. But it was all around town.
And then you traveled, and so you decided to start building out your studio. Let's dive into that. And what were some of your learning curves during that time? Because like you said, you didn't know anything about running a business. So how do you start? Like, where do you start? You know, you had an idea.
Start?
You found a space.
At IKEA is where you begin. At IKEA, the space, I mean, we're in the space right now. It was a ceiling, there were walls, and not this floor, something concrete. I came in here and I had done enough of these projects between the UK and in LA to know what a kitchen studio needed to function well, but thinking still for digital content. Kitchen studios are incredibly common in London. London's like New York. No one has space. So if an office, you know, a magazine will have an office, but you go to the studio to shoot because you're just not going to keep that much real estate to shoot 2 days a month. So that's where I learned about the kitchen studio model.
Okay.
And I was drawn to it because it wasn't exclusively video. The studio hosted video shoots. It had photo shoots. It had events. It intersected with every part of food media instead of my previous job, which was a very particular section. And I liked the openness of it because I think it hit all my interests versus like, okay, I'm doing video now. I don't think being a video producer was ever on my goal list or life list. It's just what was happening at the time in food and what was the most present thing at the time. But this opened up the industry a bit more and made it less niche.
And did you fund it yourself? Did you have to find funding? Did you have to fundraise?
It was scrappy. The first iteration of studio I raised like through family. It wasn't much, a lot of DIY, a lot of paint, but a lot of things got gifted. Like brands would come, like we have like a KitchenAid stand mixer in another space. They would come shoot here and they'd be like, do you want this? And so things and the amenities that we needed kind of just collected over time. And then once we got money, I reinvested in the space. It's like, okay, now that I got a little bit of a check from a rental, I can actually put like nice hardware on the drawers. And so I built out the initial space to be to function and to look nice enough.
For people to rent it out.
Yeah, for people to rent it out. But
and that initial step you did basically off your own funding, I guess.
Yeah,
or you
that
funded
and
it
like
yourself
family.
And family.
And then everything else came over time. Like this space has been built and tweaked over time.
Over time. And how were you publicizing it? Like how did people find out about it to even know to rent it out?
Good old-fashioned SEO. It's one thing we learned in publishing is search engine optimization.
Yeah.
And spending time like on copy and on writing and thinking about how are people finding studios, or Googling kitchen studio near me and making sure you're that first or second thing that they see when they go looking for what they need. And then after we're here for a while, it's referrals. I was here on a shoot last month and now I'm here for a new project. And so it's those two avenues, word of mouth and just making sure the web presence, we were findable.
And who's we? Was it just you? Was it you and your family?
My mom helps with the books because she's a finance lady. And so I'm very lucky I don't have to learn that heavily. And then we have a part-time editor who works on our copy, who makes sure the website is like tip top and all of our SEO is up to date and people can continue to find us.
Okay. Awesome. So how long has it been since you've opened the space?
4 years.
What would you say have been your biggest lessons, and what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I wish I knew COVID was coming because I wouldn't have done it.
Oh no.
I mean, we opened 3 months before a pandemic. It's bad luck, horrible timing. Had I had a glass ball, having a physical space where everyone's locked in their homes, not great. And so year one was rough. And it kind of set course of how the business needed to behave once we were open again.
How did you manage it? How did you manage it?
Video producing, remote. I mean, we all see content creators can do a lot by themselves. And as I said, at BuzzFeed, I did everything. Recipe developed, shot, edited. And so everyone was cooking during COVID. I don't know if y'all tried making sourdough bread. So there's like really high demand.
Banana bread was
everyone wanted to cook. But people weren't going to studios. So I, once again, had an opportunity to be like, I can shoot it for you. You don't have to rent the studio. I have a space. I can come here by myself. I can come with one person, social distance, and we can make the video for you. So it's that consequential desire for people to want to cook during lockdown, and having a space where I can film that with very limited resources, because that's what my last job was, is how the space arrived lockdown.
Wow. Okay. And then once we opened
up, we were able to take clients, but we still, it didn't cover everything, but it kept us around. But once we opened again, I think everyone was kind of in a frenzy, production-wise, because everyone was scared it was going to go lockdown again. So it was like a big rush. Everyone's like, let's film, boom, 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 boom. And then there was a spike. And I think our studio trends followed COVID. If there was a spike, everyone retracted back in. If everything was fine, people shot. And so it's very seasonal around. So yeah, I wish I had some time with the business before the pandemic to know what it's like. But we really haven't had much like normalcy, because then I thought this would be a year of normalcy, and then we have strikes. So the studio has lived in
a very tumultuous time.
Yeah.
Volatile time.
Yeah, this was not chill. I thought it would be. I'm like, I want to have my own like little space. I want to make like YouTube videos and like
shoot things.
There's not one drop of chill.
Yeah.
Ever.
And what other lessons have you learned? Even in terms of fundraising, right? Do you fundraise? For your nonprofit?
Nonprofit.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about the nonprofit space.
So when I opened our physical studio, I wanted to take advantage of having space so then I could use it to put out the content that I wanted to see more of, the stuff that I kind of asked permission to do. And overall, I think the overall industry was not doing a lot of. Being first generation American, Kenyan, Nigerian, I wanted to see more of that food for two reasons. One, it's delicious. Like the food you guys had tonight, the samosas are Kenyan, and then I did like a jollof arancini, so I made like a jollof risotto, and then that, like, these flavors are great, and if people consider themselves foodies, they would have a ball and have a great time with them. But also knowing that these foods have been historically passed down through oral tradition, my mom learned from her mom and so on and so forth, but with this new contemporary world, that's not happening in the same way. People are away from home and they're like working jobs and they're too tired to cook. And so that culture is not being passed, which is like cool because we're all doing it. But the difference is one part of the world has had thousands, tens of thousands of recipes published on its cuisine and thousands of books published on its cuisine, and one hasn't. And so there's this big risk, real risk of information loss, which has different types of consequences. And so I wanted to use this space in a way to help starting putting drops in the bucket for that. So since 2019, we've been doing events here. I've been creating content around African cuisine and diaspora cuisine, but how and where that lived to be a nonprofit happened earlier this summer, deciding that this is a project more than Kiano on her spare time, and I think seeing how quickly Africa is developing and changing, which consequentially means how a lot of countries are moving so quickly away from culture, kind of create a sense of urgency, like, damn, like if we don't start writing these recipes down or videotaping these, we won't have those opportunities. Yeah. And so form a nonprofit.
Grandparents are passing away.
Yeah. The project can be bigger than me and my personal resources. Okay. Because this affects like literal tens of millions of people.
Yeah. So how has, I mean, that's a very important mission. We don't think about that. You know what I mean?
We don't
think about
it. That's kind of like our step one of our work is like to make people start thinking about it.
To think about it, yeah. Because, culturally, there's so much traditional cultural food that, I enjoy even from South Africa. And like, when I go home, I'm like, I don't know how to make a neklo. Like, that's just not something I know how to make.
Could you imagine? Like 2 generations, people will be like, what's that?
Yeah, literally. And I go back and I'm like, yes. But like, if you had to ask me how to make it, I'd be like, I don't know. So yeah, it actually is a very important mission. So how's that vehicle been developing and growing, and what have you learned along the way for that? And how is the starting point for establishing a nonprofit?
So yeah, we're still in the early stages, still very, even still pre-fundraising. Starting a nonprofit is a lot of red tape. It costs a lot of money. Like everything, we've done small fundraising events. We have one of our chefs here, Gloria. We've done cooking classes. We've done workshops just to get that money to cover our formation costs. Because the IRS is very meticulous. You have to get a lawyer if you don't want to be rejected as a nonprofit in this country. And there's a lot of rules to follow. Forming a board, making sure that you have no business relationship with your board members. Because the nonprofit space has unfortunately been abused by a lot of people because of the tax exemptions. It's a very slow process. It's very meticulous. And even to fundraise and get money, you need to be established. People need to know that, okay, if I give you money, you're actually going to do the work that you're going to do. And that's why I'm very glad that even though we just formed, we've been doing the project since 2019. And we have actual work to show
for it. Has there been anyone helping you in navigating and learning about this, or is Google your bestie?
Learning about the nonprofit world. Our board members have been really integral. One of our board members has connected us with people who literally own companies that advise nonprofits. The thing I've learned is that there's a lot of money around this nonprofit business. It's not, the nonprofits themselves have a lot of rules, but there's just companies dedicated to helping nonprofits fundraise, like help managing nonprofits. And so there's a lot of resources that way. Being so early as we are, people are pretty open with like just giving and advising, but they've been very transparent with telling us that the first couple years are going to be slow because you still have to build that credibility. Companies, almost every major corporation has money for nonprofits, but it's competitive money. So it's a hard space, and it takes, at the stage we're in, a lot of volunteer support. Aligning with people and finding people who support this mission, who also feel that same sense of need and importance, understand the work is important, to give their time and their skills in order to get us to the point where companies are like, okay, we'll cut you your check.
And where did you, in terms of establishing a board, how do you start? What does that look like?
How do you start? You look, at least for me, it's looking at where my skill gaps were.
Okay.
For Jikoni Recipe Archive, our mission is to document and amplify the foods of Africa and across its diaspora. The documenting part costs a lot of money because what are we going to do? Go like pen and paper? Africa is a very tech-forward region. So this means digital archival. This means building a platform, which is very tech. So it's almost like a tech-based nonprofit, and tech is on my space. So finding a board member who is in tech, who is an engineer in tech, was step one. And I found that person. Well, I've known that person for years. I just didn't know they're going to be my board member.
Okay. So it was in a personal network.
Yeah, no one on the initial board, and I don't know how you can really like pluck a stranger, because being an early board member for this is you're riding for the cause and you're working
Right.
for the cause.
For the cause.
There ain't nothing else. But also you're not allowed to pay anyone. Like I'm not like, it's very interesting. So you really, and there's a positive to it because no one's faffing about. If someone says yes, they're about it, because they literally have nothing to physically, monetarily get back.
Right.
Isn't that, because it's a big no-no.
Yeah. So really in establishing your board, you looked at your environment, looked at your gaps, and established the people in your, in maybe not even immediate, but in your immediate circle that could fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I've been hugging all the questions. I'm going to open it up to the floor. If anybody has any questions they would like to ask.
What keeps you inspired?
What keeps me inspired? I like this question. My peers. Because like myself, I don't just want to see other people's food, but I do myself write recipes and create. And the voice of which I make my food is very unique to me, but also can feel a little siloed because I'm not in this like big class. So like, yes, I'm also a chef of like this really popular cuisine. So it's nice seeing and finding other chefs, whether they're immigrant Africans, first-gen Africans, who are like, I too can make really dope, really exciting food. There's like this nice, I get the energy from knowing that there's a bunch of us out there who are all seeing the same thing, who are all seeing the gaps and are working towards it. I think I wouldn't feel the same motivation if I was just like, well, here we go, just throwing myself out there. I like having peers in the space. It makes me feel good.
Through the research that you've done for the nonprofit, or I guess even during your time at BuzzFeed, are there any regional cuisines that you've discovered that really surprise you?
I think the first shock I had was Brazilian food. Brazil, because it's in Latin America, before I like learned anything about it, I thought, oh, this is going to be like all the other food in Latin America, just a different variety. And then finding out of how in certain regions, Salvador, Bahia, this food is like West African food, almost near identical, was like a huge shock. It was also exciting to see how there is space where food has survived and thrived and still had its own evolution. Everything they make looks like super delicious. I'm like, can y'all send that back? Because it looks great. And so yeah, Brazilian food to me is incredibly exciting. And I want to go down there and eat all of it because I only experience it through like Afro-Brazilian cuisine, particularly through the internet.
Were there times where you were just like, okay, this is not for me, I should give up now, and what's the next path? Or were you pretty solid in this knowing that this is something like,
Yeah, 100%.
And how did you then get through that, I guess?
Yeah, I think having run the studio for 4 years and like working in like production, like heavy, and like working on the backside of production and the execution and the space and logistics of it, I'm like, I want to just be creative. I want to like learn about people and learn about food and like synthesize that information and create versus like operation and manage. So that is something that I'm consciously trying to pluck away from my day to day and just be creative, less logistical, because it's not for me. It's stressful and there's very little joy in it.
So basically hiring somebody to eventually do that and delegate that so that you can be.
Even that though, because like there's still a brain power. Now that, because I started this whole journey being outside of this industry, not knowing anything about it. And now that I've been in it and see what space there is, I think moving away from certain parts of the industry and leaving them to folks. I like cooking. I just finished my first cookbook and I love recipe developing. And I like teaching people, I like hosting. And so I think there's a lot of those transferable skills I have had as a producer that I can put into my work, into other projects, but I could very much happily limit the time that I'm in a studio or on set to a couple times a month instead of every day.
Yeah, I think it's so admirable what you're doing. And I think that food just has this inherent quality that connects people, you know? And so I'm really interested where you see your nonprofit, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years, like how big, you know, like where do you see African food on American tables or the spread, you know? I want to hear you dream and I want to hear you dream big.
I do think of like, when I think about our nonprofit, my first thoughts are to go, where are we going to be 5 years? And then I'm like, oh, damn, we got to do this today. If I get a call from our lawyer, I'm like, oh, did we get our 501c3 yet? So this stage is, it's important, but I think I'm most excited when we have our digital archive and there are thousands of recipes to comb through. When there's a space on the internet where this food not only is saved, but has this digital community of people who literally give a crap about it and who feel connected to it and who are excited about it versus, you know, in other media spaces where we're like, hey, can we do a month? Can we have a week? Just like a space where it's comfortable and it's home and anyone, because we all have smartphones, even developing nations, like anyone can tap into and feel a sense of connection. That is the main goal for the nonprofit, is to have this digital, like almost like a community, like recipe box. Because even too, like we're in America, a lot of people are, you know, we're willingly giving our DNA to tech companies, hoping they don't do anything weird to it. but are connecting back and want to be like, oh my God, I found out I'm half Ghanaian. I want to go to Ghana. What's the next step there? How do you bring Ghana back into your home?
Into your home.
And creating a space where that's possible any day of the week. But I also want to see the menus expand, because yes, it's important to have these traditional things like the dish you love in South Africa, but also a lot of traditional foods were made for a different lifestyle, different amount of time, and I think it's kind of a tragedy where we will be like, oh, I don't have time to make this food that I love, so let me abandon it and make something else. I think I want us to be able to have projects where we can work with recipe developers and expand the menus. And so we can bring those ingredients and those tastes of culture into something that you can make on a Tuesday night. And so you can carry your culture with you every day, not just on the holidays or on the weekends.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so having an online platform making the information more accessible for everybody.
100%.
Not just online, but also in the homes and having it,
Live.
space.
Yeah.
Live
Yeah.
in American households. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful vision.
It's going to be fun.
I think so. You're in for an adventure.
Yeah.
Godspeed.
Well, okay, last one.
I'm curious what the color red means to you. I noticed from your logo is red.
Yeah.
Led me to this from outside, all these little marks of red. You're wearing red. And as a chef, when I see red seasoning on something, or red, I know that it's well seasoned.
Oh.
When you see red seasoning on French fries, I know oh, somebody thought about these fries. And so I'm just curious. I don't know if I'm overthinking it, but I'm curious if you have any connection to the color red.
Yeah, no, red has a big, I think I do, even though I am two cultures, I am in a different level connected to my maternal culture. And I know you're plant-based chefs, this is not the right answer for you, but for Maasai people, red is our color, and that red represents blood. We are pastoralists, our animals go where we go. Without the animals, it's just like we're so integrated and tied. And before Maasai people settled in Kenya, Tanzania regions, we were nomads, and our animals kept us alive. We have ways where you'll kind of prick a vein of a cow, you'll collect its blood, mix that blood with milk and drink it as like a little vitamin shot to keep you going on those like very long journeys that we took down the Nile into our lands. And so blood is incredibly important. It literally keeps us all alive. But also I love color, and I love bright colors. I've always been this way. But red, lately, it's the color that makes me feel the most me. Like I feel like Kiano in red and with red.
I want to know what you cook at home.
What do I cook at home?
Casual night, your go-to dish.
This week, even.
This week. See, this helps me. Thank you.
This week, yeah.
What did I cook this week?
I feel like you cooked I don't know, from your social media, you were cooking
last
things.
night.
Yeah, yesterday, didn't you cook a lamb burger this week?
I did.
Didn't you cook like something else that looked this? I was on your gram a lot this week. I was like,
Yeah.
So-
The nice thing about being able to cook is
Ooh, you
that
cooked a shrimp dish this week.
I cook shrimp.
There was like, yeah, twice. Didn't you cook shrimp twice? There was a shrimp over like something, a bean.
Okay, yes.
A bean, a shrimp
Yes,
of a
I know
bean
what you're
thing.
talking about.
There was a lamb burger.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the shrimp dish you're talking about, you know when you get like Indian food takeout and it's like
Yeah.
like 5 chunks of meat and all that sauce?
Yeah.
It feels frustrating, but it's really a blessing because they have cooked your next dinner for you. So I keep the sauce, put the sauce in the pan, just straight out the freezer, frozen shrimp, still frozen, with some. In Trader Joe's, they have these like pre-cut garlic pods and ginger pods. So you pop 2 of those out with the frozen shrimp, some olive oil, let everything become unfrozen, add in some frozen peas. Those don't need much time being unfrozen, and then pour that extra sauce from the Indian takeaway. So that's one thing I had for dinner. It was great.
Yeah,
And
it looked delicious.
as
on
lazy
plate.
as it comes. I'm a very unfussy cook. When I'm cooking for myself, I will never sacrifice my laziness for flavor. is a crime I will never commit, but I will make it as unfussy. And then I made a smash burger. It was a lamb burger. Seasoned it with salt, pepper, cumin. Smashed it real thin, cooked on the cast iron, and with some onions, and then I put some feta and cilantro on top. Let that get soft, stacked them in there, put on a potato roll.
What was the pasta you were eating today?
What do they have?
When I arrived.
Oh, I made cacio e pepe for lunch because there's no ingredients here.
Casual.
There's no ingredients here.
Made casual. I came in, I was like, so this is just what you have for lunch. It was like eating it casual. I was like, cool.
I mean, you know, cacio e
I'm
pepe
gonna
is a
go
great
order some Thai food.
pantry meal because I literally had no fresh ingredients, no nothing except for the food I cooked for y'all. I had pasta in the pantry and I had a block of cheese in the fridge, and so that was the food that could be made with nothing. Bless you.
Bless you. I was hoping I wouldn't have that on camera. Okay, guys, we have to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time
Thank you.
and for your wisdom. And so much valuable information and like little juicy kernels of, knowledge and tips that I think people find useful. I found useful.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone does anything, when you see your family next for holidays, just write down one recipe, like just one thing.
I'm gonna come back with
That's
two.
like that's my action item for all the humans.
Yeah.
Just like knock one down, and also if you don't like writing, you and your smartphone just record it. Just record it and hang out with your family members while they're cooking, and that piece of knowledge will serve you very well for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I'll do two. I'll come back with 2 South African recipes for you.
The one that you miss that you don't know how to make.
They're mini.
Oh goodness, you gotta have some like data storage on your phone.
Yeah. I'll come back with it. Anyway, thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you. Eat more food. Thank you.